The October air bit sharp and clean as Rachel Morrison stepped through the checkpoint at Fort Carson. A cloud of breath drifted in front of her, then vanished just as quickly as she kept walking, boots crunching on the gravel path that led into the sprawling vehicle depot. She carried what looked like the standard contractor's kit, a clipboard tucked under one arm, a rugged diagnostic case in her right hand. Nothing about her appearance drew attention. Gray polo shirt, khaki slacks, contractor ID clipped neatly to her chest. Another civilian tech here to keep the Army's new emergency alert system in working order. The guards barely gave her a second glance. They checked the badge, waved her through, and went back to chatting about weekend plans. That was fine with Rachel. Being overlooked was something she'd learned to perfect. The depot itself was cavernous, echoing with the sounds of engines being tuned and tools clanging against metal frames. Rows of Humvees sat parked in neat lines, their olive paint catching the early sunlight. Massive transport trucks loomed like sleeping giants. Along the far eastern wall, dominating the space, stood the Aegis Siren system, a towering grid of black steel panels and stacked speakers designed to blast orders across the base in seconds. It was the pride of Fort Carson's communications infrastructure, supposedly state-of-the-art. Rachel let her gaze move across it with the careful calm of someone who already knew what she was looking for. She noted a wiring junction that wasn't properly shielded, a configuration panel left in diagnostic mode instead of standby. Small things, but small things in the wrong moment could kill. "Sweetheart," a voice called, slick with false charm. Rachel turned her head slightly. A man in a stretched polo shirt was striding toward her, belly straining against the fabric, jaw set in a smirk. Marcus Thompson. His reputation had reached her even before she'd walked through the gate. Self-appointed king of the depot's technical crew. Known more for loud opinions than sharp skills. "You think you're some kind of expert?" he asked, voice booming enough to catch the attention of the gathered technicians. They perked up, sensing entertainment. "Just read the damn test phrase. We don't have all day for your opinions." A chuckle rippled through the crowd. Phones came out, half hidden at first, then boldly raised. They wanted footage. A clip for the group chat. Maybe something to throw online. Rachel stood still, one hand resting lightly on the heavy-duty microphone attached to the Aegis console. She didn't fidget, didn't smile. Just held it the way she'd held microphones 100 times before, thumb positioned exactly where the push-to-talk button would be on a military radio. From the corner of the room, Colonel Bradley noticed. He leaned against a patrol vehicle, arms folded, expression unreadable. He was a man who had seen his share of real soldiers, and something about the way this contractor carried herself didn't fit. The stance, the grip, the stillness. It made the hair at the back of his neck rise. Rachel ignored Marcus and studied the system's control screen. She began typing notes into her ruggedized tablet, her fingers moving with brisk precision. To anyone else, it looked like a standard contractor logging inspection details. To Bradley, it looked like muscle memory, fast, confident, deliberate. Well, Marcus said, louder now, pacing like a man preparing for a performance. "They sent us a lady contractor. Hope you know the difference between a speaker and a microphone, honey." Laughter bubbled louder this time. A couple of younger technicians nudged each other, grinning as they set their phones to record. This was going to be good. Thompson loved humiliating contractors, and the audience always ate it up. Rachel didn't respond. She checked the wiring diagram on her screen, noted another error, and continued. The silence from her end only seemed to embolden Marcus. "Listen up, people," he called out. "Let the contractor do her little test. Nobody help her. I want to see if corporate actually sends us folks who know what they're doing, or if they're just ticking boxes these days." The casual bite of sexism clung to his words like smoke. A few of the techs laughed nervously. Others shifted, uncomfortable but unwilling to speak up. Private Chun, the youngest in the group, frowned. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something about the scene felt off. The woman's eyes weren't just looking at the system, they were cataloging every movement in the room. She tracked each person without seeming to. There was a scar at the base of her neck, the kind that lined up perfectly with where a tactical headset strap would rub. And that watch on her wrist, definitely not something you picked up at the base exchange. But nobody else noticed. They only saw a contractor about to be schooled. Rachel finished her notes and finally turned, meeting Marcus's gaze with calm neutrality. The system has several configuration issues, she said evenly. They need correction before testing. For example, the feedback loop between channels 3 and 7 could cause a critical delay in a real emergency. The laughter cut short. Marcus flushed red, his smirk faltering before snapping back into place. I've been running this depot for 5 years. I know how to configure a speaker system. Just do your job and read the test phrase. That's what you're here for, not to play engineer. Bradley shifted his weight, eyes narrowing. This wasn't a normal contractor, and she wasn't playing at anything. Rachel raised the microphone. Her stance shifted slightly, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, posture alert. A soldier's stance, not a contractor's. Bradley knew it instantly. His instincts sharpened. Come on, sweetheart, Marcus goaded, sensing her pause. It's simple. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Even you should be able to handle that. The technicians laughed again, but quieter this time. Chen's unease deepened. Rachel's thumb hovered over the mic switch. Her breathing slowed. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. Hold. Tactical breathing. Bradley froze, recognition slamming into him. He'd seen that ritual countless times in combat zones, operators centering themselves before pulling a trigger, breachers steadying before they hit a door. Rachel keyed the mic. The soft electronic beep cut through the depot. Every phone kept rolling. Every laugh quieted just a fraction. In 20 minutes, none of them would be laughing at all. Marcus Thompson circled like a wolf that had already decided its prey was weak. He clapped his hands together once, the sharp sound echoing across the concrete walls. See, folks? This is what happens when corporate sends us contractors who think they're smarter than the rest of us. Instead of running a simple test, she's lecturing about wiring. Next thing, she'll be telling us how to drive a Humvee. The group of technicians laughed on cue, though the sound was thinner than before. Some leaned against vehicles, others leaned into their phones, thumbs flying as they streamed or recorded. Rachel stood exactly where she had been, holding the microphone loosely in one hand, her other hand still resting on the rugged tablet. If the ridicule touched her, she didn't show it. Colonel Bradley, still posted near the corner, studied the scene with sharpened attention. He'd learned long ago that silence was its own kind of weapon, one that unnerved men like Thompson more than any verbal counterpunch. And the woman Rachel was wielding it with precision. She didn't argue, didn't defend, just existed, steady and unshaken. Come on now, Marcus continued, his grin widening as he noticed the phones tracking him. Let's make this official. Nobody lift a finger to help her. Let's see if she can handle the basics. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Even kids at a science fair can manage that. The laughter returned, louder this time, though it carried a nervous edge. Private Chun shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His eyes stayed fixed on Rachel, the discomfort in his chest growing heavier. He wanted to say something, anything, but the chain of command and the weight of group pressure glued his mouth shut. Rachel tapped a note into her tablet, then laid it down on the console. She raised her eyes and spoke in a level voice. The system is not ready for testing. A ripple went through the room. Marcus's smirk hardened. Not ready? Lady, it's been ready for weeks. I tuned this system myself. I've forgotten more about audio protocols than you'll ever learn. Now stop wasting our time and read the phrase. She studied him for a long, silent beat. Then she said, if this system were used in a live emergency right now, there would be a 3.7-second delay in message delivery. That's long enough for someone to die. Her voice was even, factual, but the weight of her words hit heavier than shouting ever could. Marcus flushed crimson. Oh, so you're a prophet now? Predicting deaths from cables and wires? Listen, sweetheart. Don't, Bradley muttered under his breath, unheard by most. Marcus leaned closer, crowding her space. This is a military installation. We run on facts, not fantasy. So unless you've got classified proof hidden in that tablet of yours, you're just another overpaid contractor with opinions. Now read. The phrase. The crowd tensed. Even the laughter faded completely this time. Rachel shifted slightly, angling her body. Bradley saw it instantly. Her feet, now firmly planted shoulder-width apart, her weight evenly distributed, ready to move in any direction. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't aggressive. It was readiness distilled into posture. The kind of stance you didn't learn in a civilian office. Marcus mistook it for hesitation. He puffed himself up further. What's the problem? Mix too heavy? Too complicated? Just say the line. It's not rocket science. Rachel keyed the mic again, but didn't speak. The beep cut through the depot, sharp and expectant. She lowered the mic without saying a word, then set it gently on the console. The problem, she said, her tone calm and deliberate, is that your system isn't built the way you think it is. You've wired it to broadcast, yes. But you've overlooked embedded protocols that aren't in your manuals. Protocols that, if triggered, would bypass every configuration you think you control. Her gaze swept across the technicians, not just Marcus. Your system has a ghost key. Silence fell. The phrase seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. Marcus barked out a laugh, loud and theatrical. Ghost key? What is this, a movie? You've been reading Wikipedia again, sweetheart? Let me guess next you're going to tell us this thing can launch nukes if you whisper the right password. The laughter resumed, but this time it was forced. Uneasy. Even the younger technicians glanced at each other, unsure. Bradley went very still. He'd heard whispers about ghost protocols before. Rumors passed in hushed voices, always with the caveat, don't repeat this. Ghost keys were supposed to be urban legends in military comms back doors built into systems for use only by their architects, with clearance levels so high that even most colonels weren't briefed. If this woman knew about them, she wasn't a contractor. Look, Marcus said, turning toward his audience now, arms wide as if presenting a comedy act. This is gold. Ghost keys. Hidden codes. Next she'll be telling us she's Jason Bourne. I hope you're getting this on video, because this is going to kill in the group chat. Phones were raised higher. The red live dots glowed on several screens now. Soldiers across the base were tuning in, ready to watch another civilian humiliate herself. Rachel's face didn't change. If anything, her breathing slowed further, controlled, precise. Bradley caught it instantly. Tactical breathing. 4 in. Hold. 4 out. Hold. Her calm in the storm unsettled him more than Marcus's bluster. Marcus, sensing his dominance slipping, jabbed a finger toward her tablet. You think you know so much? Then tell us, expert. What does this magical ghost key actually do? Rachel lifted the microphone again, her movements smooth, unhurried. For the first time, her eyes locked with Marcus's, steady and unflinching. I don't just know what it does, she said softly. I built it. The depot fell utterly silent. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The technicians stared, unsure if they'd heard correctly. Even Marcus froze, his mouth half open, the comeback dying on his tongue. Only Bradley breathed out, the confirmation of every instinct hitting him like a weight. Whoever this woman was, she wasn't here to play games. And Fort Carson was about to learn the truth. The depot seemed to inhale and hold its breath. Even the steady hum of the ventilation fans felt muted, as if the building itself was listening. Rachel Morrison stood before the Aegis console with the microphone in her hand, eyes steady, her words still echoing in the stunned silence. I built it. Marcus Thompson blinked, his face contorting as though he'd just been slapped. He forced a laugh, sharp and unnatural. Built it? Oh, come on. You weren't even out of middle school when this system was designed. Don't tell me what's next. You're the secret architect of the Pentagon, too? His laughter rang hollow, bouncing against the walls without catching on the technicians the way it had before. Colonel Bradley didn't move. His years in uniform had taught him how to read the air in a room, how to spot the moment when a situation shifted from theater to something real. This was one of those moments. Rachel raised the microphone to her lips. The motion was smooth, almost rehearsed, the way a soldier might rack a weapon, without thinking. She pressed the switch, and the small electronic beep echoed like a bell. Every technician unconsciously leaned in. But Rachel didn't say testing, 1, 2, 3. Her voice came low and precise, each syllable clear. Initialize shadow protocol. For a single heartbeat, nothing happened. Marcus opened his mouth, ready to pounce, to unleash another wave of ridicule. The younger technicians shifted awkwardly, phones still raised, fingers hovering above screens, as the live stream chat filled with mocking emojis. Then the depot changed. A deep chime rang out, resonant and strange, vibrating through steel beams and concrete walls. The sound was unlike anything the technicians had ever heard from the system. The Aegis control screens flickered violently, lines of text racing across faster than the human eye could follow. One by one, each monitor went black. The silence that followed was heavier than laughter, heavier than mockery. Then, in bold red letters across the main screen, "System override engaged." The technicians gasped. Private Chun nearly dropped his phone. Someone's clipboard clattered to the floor, loud as a gunshot. From the speakers, a voice filled the depot. It wasn't human, not exactly, but it wasn't fully artificial either. It had weight, authority, the kind of resonance that cut through chaos. VoicePrint authenticated. Biometric match confirmed. Command override accepted. Every technician turned to stare at Rachel, their expressions caught between awe and disbelief. Marcus stumbled back a step. What the hell is this? The system wasn't finished. The red text shifted, new words glowing like fire across the dark screen. Classification, Obsidian Black. Delta Force authorization recognized. Bradley inhaled sharply. His gut told him what his brain refused to accept. Obsidian Black wasn't just top secret. It was higher than top secret, buried so deep in classified projects that most people in uniform had never even heard the phrase. It was whispered in war rooms, in the shadows of operations so sensitive that their files never touched ordinary systems. And now the words glowed on the depot's wall. The Aegis system spoke again, its tone colder, more deliberate. "Welcome back, Shadow Commander." The title hit like a hammer. Marcus's skin drained of color. The phones in the crowd trembled in their owners' hands. The live stream chat exploded strings of expletives, disbelief, frantic speculation flooding the scrolling feed. Bradley's chest tightened. He had heard the whispers before. Shadow Commander. A ghost name attached to operations no one admitted existed. Some said she'd revolutionized battlefield comms. Others claimed she'd disappeared into the black world of Delta operations. But no one believed she was real. And yet here she stood. Rachel set the microphone down gently on the console, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Her expression remained calm, her posture steady, but the room around her had shifted completely. Colonel Bradley straightened, the weight of years pressing on him. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand in salute. The gesture was instinctive, a recognition that came from something deeper than rank. "Shadow Commander," he said, his voice carrying across the stunned depot. "I thought you were just a legend." The technicians turned their heads in unison, their eyes darting between Rachel and the colonel. They weren't laughing now. Not a single one of them. Major Kim had entered during the chaos, drawn by the alerts. Her security insignia caught the fluorescent lights as she froze in the doorway. She had trained her whole life to assess situations quickly, to recognize threat levels before anyone else. The recognition that flickered in her eyes lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was there. "Ma'am," she said quietly, her voice taut with awe. "It's an honor." Marcus, still pale, opened and closed his mouth like a fish gasping for air. His authority, his arrogance, his entire persona, all of it crumbled under the weight of what had just been revealed. Rachel turned toward the technicians, her eyes steady. For the first time since she had arrived, they saw her as she truly was. Not a civilian contractor in a polo shirt. Not a woman standing quietly while being mocked. But the architect of the system, the one whose knowledge ran deeper than their manuals, the one whose very presence had forced the Aegis system to bow to her command. I created this system, she said evenly. Every line of code, every layer of redundancy, every protocol designed to save lives. And I created the ghost key as insurance because someday, this system might fall into hands that didn't understand its purpose. Today, that insurance activated. She let her gaze rest briefly on Marcus, then moved past him. This isn't a toy. It's not here for your amusement. It's here to keep people alive. The words hung heavy, unanswerable. The technicians shifted uneasily, their faces a mixture of shame and respect. Even Private Chun, who had doubted from the start, found himself standing straighter, his phone lowered now, forgotten in his hand. Bradley lowered his salute slowly, his face solemn. After all these years, he murmured, almost to himself, "You've been here, working among us, hiding in plain sight." Rachel gave no answer, only the silence of someone who had lived long in shadows, and was now, for just a moment, standing in the light. The Aegis system's red lettering still glowed across the console. Classification, Obsidian Black. Welcome back, Shadow Commander. No one moved. The silence had a weight to it, a silence that swallowed up the earlier laughter and left only the sound of breathing, unsteady and uneven. Rachel stood at the console, her hands folded neatly in front of her, the microphone resting where she had placed it. Calm, composed, utterly in control. Colonel Bradley finally broke the stillness. "Thompson." His voice was sharp, cold enough to slice. Marcus flinched. "You've just spent the morning mocking a decorated veteran who has forgotten more about battlefield communication than you'll ever learn. The architect of the very system you claim to master. Do you understand what that means?" Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. His lips worked uselessly as his face flushed red. Rachel turned slightly, her eyes sweeping the room. "It's not his fault alone," she said. "All of you assumed the same thing. You saw a contractor, a woman, someone in a polo shirt. You saw what you expected to see, not what was actually there. That mistake is as dangerous as any wiring fault." The technicians shifted uncomfortably. Even the ones who had laughed the loudest now stared at the floor, shame written across their faces. Rachel picked up her tablet and tapped a few commands. The Aegis screens flickered to life again, this time showing detailed diagnostic data. She pointed to a section of code highlighted in amber. "This," she said, "is a feedback loop between channels 3 and 7. It causes a 3.7-second delay in transmission. Doesn't sound like much, does it?" No one answered. In 2018, a base in Afghanistan had a similar flaw in its alert system. Rachel continued. Her voice was steady, but something darker stirred behind her eyes. Incoming rocket fire was detected. The warning should have sounded instantly, but there was a 3-second delay, long enough that 2 soldiers never made it to the bunker. She let the weight of that hang in the air. The room was utterly still. "That's what your mistakes cost," Rachel said softly. "Not embarrassment, not inconvenience. Lives." She zoomed in on another section of the code, her fingers moving with practiced speed. "This flaw here, unshielded wiring on your Easter array, would create interference in high humidity. During a storm, you could lose 10% of your broadcast range. That might not matter in a test, but in a wildfire evacuation, it means families never hear the order to move." Private Chun swallowed hard. He hadn't even noticed the flaw she was pointing at. Rachel looked directly at him. "You noticed me, though, didn't you? You saw things the others missed. My stance, my watch, the way I held the microphone. Trust that instinct. Observation saves lives." Chun straightened slightly, pride flickering in his eyes even as his cheeks flushed. Rachel shifted her focus back to the group. "Everything in this system has a story. Every protocol, every redundancy written in blood. You want to know why there's biometric voice authentication?" No one spoke. In 2012, enemy fighters captured one of our forward base's radios. They tried to send false evacuation orders to lure our soldiers into an ambush. It nearly worked. We lost good men and women that day. I designed the voice recognition to stop that from ever happening again. It isn't just technology, it's protection against history repeating itself. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the room. For the first time, some of the technicians looked back not with embarrassment, but with respect. The ghost key, Rachel continued, was my insurance policy. Systems can be stolen. Protocols can be reverse-engineered. But there needed to be a way for someone who knew what they were doing to take control when all else failed. That's why it exists. That's why I exist. The words hit like a hammer. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his earlier arrogance bleeding away, replaced by a raw, almost childlike uncertainty. I didn't know, he stammered. You couldn't have, Rachel replied, her tone level. But that's the point. You assumed. You dismissed. You mocked. How many others have you dismissed the same way? How many ideas have you ignored because they didn't come from you? Marcus's shoulders slumped. For once, he had no answer. Rachel turned back to the console, pulling up schematics. Now, she said briskly, we fix this. Watch carefully. Her fingers moved across the controls with impossible speed. Code scrolled. Configurations shifted. Hidden menus appeared. Menus the technicians had never seen before. She explained as she worked. This subroutine reroutes transmission priority to secondary channels. This correction eliminates the 3.7-second delay. And this adjustment ensures redundancy is maintained even if power fails in the eastern grid. She stepped back, and the screen showed a green confirmation. System optimized. The technicians murmured softly, the sound more reverent than confused. They were watching a master at work, someone who moved not with guesswork, but with certainty. Rachel faced them again. You think your job is to maintain equipment. It isn't. Your job is to guard lives. Every bolt you tighten, every wire you connect, every test you run, it's life or death. Never forget that. The weight of her words sank into them. Even the ones who had laughed hardest earlier now stood straighter, chastened. Rachel walked over to Marcus. He stiffened as she stopped in front of him. You have a choice, she said quietly, so only he could hear. You can cling to pride and walk away unchanged. Or you can admit your mistakes, learn, and become the leader your team actually needs. Marcus's face was a battlefield of emotions: shame, anger, pride, and something else. Respect. He looked down, then back up. I'm sorry, he said, his voice low but clear. Not just for today. For every time I dismissed someone out of arrogance. I want to do better. Rachel studied him for a long moment, then reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small, worn coin. She placed it in his hand. Marcus gasped. It was a Delta Force challenge, coined the kind that was never sold, only earned. My first team leader gave me that when I thought I knew everything, Rachel said. Told me to carry it until I found someone who needed the lesson more than I needed the reminder. Don't make me regret giving it to you. Marcus's throat worked as he swallowed hard. I won't, he whispered. I swear I won't. The technicians were silent, watching the exchange with wide eyes. The live stream phones had been lowered now, forgotten in the gravity of the moment. Rachel stepped back, her gaze sweeping the room once more. This is the lesson, she said. Respect is earned in silence. Excellence speaks for itself. Never forget it. The depot, once filled with laughter and mockery, was transformed. Every man and woman in that room felt it. They weren't just watching a contractor anymore. They were standing in the presence of a commander. The afternoon sun slanted through the depot's tall windows, catching in the dust that hung in the air. What had begun as a morning of mockery and casual cruelty had transformed into something else entirely. Every technician stood straighter now, their laughter gone, their respect palpable. Rachel Morrison's shadow commander moved with the same calm efficiency she'd shown all along, her hands guiding Private Shin through a final diagnostic. The young man watched closely, committing each step to memory, his earlier nervousness replaced by pride. This loop here, Rachel explained, pointing to a junction on the schematic, would normally create interference. But if you reroute it this way, The system carries the load without delay. Chen nodded eagerly. Yes, ma'am. Don't just memorize the steps, Rachel told him. Understand the why. That instinct you felt today? Trust it. Question what doesn't look right. Never let someone laugh you out of what your gut tells you. Chen's chest swelled. Yes, ma'am. I won't forget. Rachel gave the faintest of nods, then returned her attention to the group as a whole. For 3 hours you've heard stories about delays that cost lives, about protocols written because someone bled for them. Remember this. Every system you maintain has ghosts in it. Ghosts of the people who paid the price for failures. Your responsibility is to honor those ghosts by doing your job right. The depot was silent. Not a shuffle, not a cough. Only the weight of her words. Colonel Bradley broke the silence, stepping forward. His voice carried the respect of a man who had spent decades in uniform. Shadow Commander, he said, the title no longer whispered. With your permission, I'd like to implement a training program across Fort Carson based on your protocols. What you've taught here shouldn't stay in one room. It should be institutional knowledge. Rachel considered him for a long moment. I can arrange that, she said. But first, her gaze shifted back to Marcus Thompson. He stood stiffly at his workstation, the challenge coin heavy in his pocket. His face was pale, but his shoulders were squared. For once, he didn't look like the depot's self-appointed king. He looked like a man who had been humbled and was trying to rise from the rubble of his arrogance. Mr. Thompson, Rachel said evenly, I told you this morning you had a choice. Pride or humility. Which do you choose? Marcus's voice was steady, though quiet. Humility, ma'am. If you'll allow it, I want to learn. Not just about the system. About leadership. Rachel studied him, then inclined her head. Then you're already farther along than most. The technicians glanced at one another, each realizing they had just witnessed something rare. Not humiliation, but transformation. Rachel returned to the console, key to final command, and the system pulsed green. System optimized. All channels clear. She closed the tablet with a click and began packing her equipment. The depot felt different now. Respect lingered in the air, replacing the earlier smugness. Even the civilian technicians stood a little taller, their faces set with new resolve. Bradley approached once more. If I may ask, why reveal yourself now? You could have fixed the system and walked out. No one would have known who you really were. Rachel gave him the faintest smile, the first true smile she'd shown all day. Because sometimes the mission isn't about shadows. Sometimes it's about stepping into the light long enough to remind people what competence looks like. To remind them not to judge by appearances. Bradley nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Outside, the Colorado sun lit the horizon. Inside, the technicians snapped to attention as Rachel moved toward the door. Even Marcus, humbled and quiet, straightened into a posture of respect. At the threshold, Rachel paused. She looked back once at the faces turned toward her. Remember this, she said clearly. True strength whispers. True competence doesn't need to shout. And true leadership serves, not struts. With that, she stepped into the light. By evening, the video had gone viral. What had started as a live stream intended to mock a contractor had been replayed thousands of times across the base, then tens of thousands across the wider military community. The chat that once filled with laughing emojis now filled with awe. Shadow Commander is real. Respect is earned in silence. Fort Carson just got the lesson of a lifetime. Within days, the footage had millions of views. By the end of the month, training modules built from Rachel's lessons were circulating unofficially through commands worldwide. The story had spread further than any official memo ever could. 6 months later, Fort Carson's emergency systems tested at 100% efficiency, the highest in the command. The depot's culture had shifted too. Marcus Thompson, once the loudest voice in the room, had become known for his patience and his refusal to dismiss anyone's idea without listening. He carried the Delta coin in his pocket every day, a weight and a reminder. And Rachel Morrison? She slipped quietly back into the rhythm of her hidden work, moving between bases, inspecting systems, correcting flaws, teaching lessons without fanfare. She was there, and not there all at once, a guardian in plain sight. At Fort Carson, a sign appeared in the depot the following week. No one admitted to putting it up, but everyone knew why it was there. Respect is earned in silence. Excellence speaks for itself. Beneath it, in smaller letters, someone had scrawled, "Shadow Commander was here." The legend lived on. And in the quiet places where legends thrive, Rachel Morrison smiled and kept moving. Because the shadows weren't where she hid. They were where she worked.